Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. We're reacting to some of the most watched TikTok true crimes. Before we start, though, make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit that like button. All right, guys, let's jump in and see what we got today.
This killer accidentally admitted to his crimes by accident when he forgot he was wearing a microphone while taking part in a documentary. This is how a true crime documentary exposed a killer. In 1971, Robert Durst met Kathleen McCormack and they got married. At the time of her disappearance in 1982, Kathleen had nearly graduated college. She was last seen by a witness at a dinner party where she appeared to be upset. She got a call from Robert and left. Robert admitted to having argued with Kathleen that night, but he said he put her on a train to New York and then never saw her again. Her friend called police to report her missing. Interestingly, Kathleen had been treated at a medical center for facial bruises weeks prior to this and told the friend that Robert had done it. Robert had actually been dating someone else for some time prior to this and had been living separately to Kathleen. When her family broke into her cottage to try and find out where she was, they found the place had been trashed and her possessions put in the bin. Kathleen's family always believed that Robert was involved in her disappearance. In 2000, Susan Berman, a friend of Robert's, was found murdered. Now, she'd actually provided Robert with an alibi for Kathleen's disappearance. Now, pay really close attention to this next bit. Days after she was killed, a letter addressed to the Beverly Hills Police Department contained Susan's address and the word cadaver on it. On the envelope, Beverly was misspelled. Robert admitted in 2005 that Susan had called him shortly before her death to say that the police wanted to question her about Kathleen going missing. It's believed that Robert killed Susan to keep her quiet. In 2001, Robert's neighbor's body parts were found floating in Galveston Bay. Robert's elderly neighbor, Morris Black, had been killed and Robert was arrested. He was actually released on bail and fled and was found about a month later in Pennsylvania. He was found with $37,000 cash, 2 weapons, and interestingly, Morris Black's driving license. In court, Robert claimed he was acting in self-defense. He said he'd accidentally shot Morris and dismembered his body. Due to lack of forensics, he only got 5 years in jail.
Accidentally?
This is where things get really crazy.
His body?
HBO was filming a documentary called The Jinx. During production, Susan's stepson found a letter written by Robert. This contained the same spelling error in the word Beverly as the anonymous letter to police. This implicated Robert in the murder. Now, while filming the documentary, Robert needed the toilet. He forgot that he had a microphone still attached to him. He was recorded talking to himself. He said, "There it is, you're caught. You're right, of course, but you can't imagine. Arrest him." And then he said, "What a disaster. He was right, I was wrong." And finally he said, "I'm having difficulty with the question. What the hell did I do? Killed them all, of course."
So this murdered Texas couple's missing baby has finally been found after 42 years. And the story is crazy. Let's take a look. So in 1981, Dean Klaus, his wife Tina Lynn, and their baby Holly disappeared without a trace in East Texas. The only clue was from an anonymous caller who said that he had found Dean's car in California. And he claimed that 3 women in white robes drove it from Texas to California. Police were actually able to track down one of the women who called herself Sister Susan, and she claimed that Dean had joined a cult and renounced all earthly possessions. And she wouldn't tell them anything else. It actually wasn't until late last year that human remains found around the same time were confirmed to be Dean and Tina's. Dean had been beaten to death and Tina had been strangled. But that didn't answer what happened to Holly. This year, investigators were searching for human remains around where Dean and Tina were found. And that's when they got a genetics hit that Holly was alive and in Oklahoma. But get this, when they were talking to Holly, they found out that she had been left on the steps of a church in Arizona by none other than 3 women in white robes. Investigation is still pending, and they are really trying to figure out who these white-robed women are. But for now, at least we know that Holly is alive and well.
Today's case is one of these cases that you'll most likely recognise like the famous mugshot from. So this here is 18-year-old Shaylyn Moran. At the time of what she did, she was 18 years old, and this takes place in 2019. She was from a place called Pawtucket, which is in America, and in the fall of October 2019, she met a boy online who she started a relationship with. This boy was called Leonard Trowfield, and I couldn't find any photos of him for some reason. On the first day that they met in person, the pair stayed at Leonard's house. However, after day 4, the pair got into quite the argument. where Shaylyn had stormed out of the house and filed a police report against Leonard. And she had called assault, which Leonard absolutely denied was not true. The pair were then given a no-contact order. And the reason why I'm kind of leaning to believe Leonard is, I'll tell you why. So obviously when you're given a no-contact order, you cannot contact that person. But this didn't bother Shaylyn. She was sending death threats to absolutely all of his family, including his dog. So after the breakup, she then very quickly met Jack Doherty. And together they had conspired that they were going to kill Shaylyn's ex. And Jack was absolutely down for that. He was so ready to do it. They were sending each other texts like, if you do this, we'll be together forever, I love you, and all that. And at the end of December 2019, so we're literally talking 2 months later, Jack came down from New York to see Shaylyn. Not only this, he also brought an engagement ring with him, and the pair were ready to go to her ex's house to commit a shooting. So Shaylyn had actually stayed in a hotel nearby where the pair were staying. She didn't go with him, and they decided that they were just going to shoot whoever opened the door. So on January 1st, 2020, Jack Doherty went to the address of Leonard, and it was his mother, Cheryl Smith, that opened the door, and she was shot several times, which killed her. Another strange thing that I just want to know, I couldn't find many photos of Cheryl either. To which, after it took place, they then posted this on Facebook, which says, "We some fighters and some shooters." And she's also showing off her engagement ring in the post. Luckily, a detective that was responding to the shooting had saw this post that these two had posted. So literally just a couple hours later, they were arrested in the hotel room, which I just think is kind of funny, to be honest. Like, how stupid do you have to be? And the cops found the gun that was used in the shooting that matched the bullets found in Cheryl. Jack Doherty is still in prison awaiting trial.
That's terrible.
But because Shaylyn was really the mastermind behind it, she knew what she was doing. She was sentenced to life in prison for her part on killing Cheryl Smith.
In a horrifying piece of CCTV footage, a man tries to abduct a barista through the drive-thru window. Washington State Police have released this clip that occurred on Monday at around 5 a.m. of a man in his car trying to pull the barista out of the drive-thru window into his car whilst he's holding a zip tie device. She's seen just handling cash before he literally lurches out of the window and grabs her wrist, and the other hand has a zip tie. Thankfully, she managed to escape before he just sped off. Despite the terrifying nature of the crime, thankfully, due to the publication of the CCTV, police received loads of tips and actually arrested a suspect on Tuesday morning. The giveaway for the alleged suspect was actually the tattoo, which spelled Chevrolet. Not a very common tattoo, but led to a lot of people phoning in and even giving a name. Thank goodness she managed to get away. That is not okay.
This 14-year-old boy is one of the UK's most dangerous killers. I'm True Crime Caitlin, and this is the murder of Joe Galen. Today's case takes place in Bury, Manchester in 2006. Joe is an 11-year-old, very well-liked, charismatic boy who loved everything to do with football and had cystic fibrosis. On the 1st of March, he receives a handwritten note from 14-year-old Michael Harmer, who had told Joe that this was a note from the deputy head teacher. The note instructed Joe that he had to go home with Michael that night, that he was his mentor, and that his mum was going to pick him up from there after school. Joe had mentioned the note to teachers who had questioned it, not believing that it had actually came from the deputy head teacher. This teacher was partway through advising Joe not to do it when the fire alarm went off, disrupting the conversation and forcing all the students to evacuate the school. Michael had in fact fabricated the note in order to lure Joe back to his house. He had developed some sort of obsession and fascination with Joe, and maybe experienced some sort of jealousy towards Joe. Michael was quite the opposite of him. He was very reserved, very quiet, and he didn't really have any friends. When the boys arrived at Michael's house after school, he proceeded to make sexual advances towards Joe. Joe rejected these advances, calling Michael gay, and threatened to tell everyone in school what Michael had just tried to do. Filled with rage and probably feeling extremely embarrassed, Michael picked up a frying pan and proceeded to bludgeon Joe with it. He whacked Joe a total of 5 times with so much force that it had broken his eye socket and broke the pan. After retrieving 2 knives, Michael would go on to stab poor Joe 16 times. Some wounds were up to 8 inches long, and he had been stabbed in the neck, face, and his upper body. After murdering Joe, Michael dragged his body downstairs, hauled him into a bin, and began to wheel him to nearby Whitehead Park. This was at around 4:30 p.m. Back at their home, the parents of Joe began to worry. He wasn't the type of boy who would wander about after school. He was very rarely late, and he needed medical treatment for his cystic fibrosis that without could be detrimental. They knew that something wasn't right, and at 5:30 p.m. they contacted the police and reported Joe missing. Thankfully, the police took this serious immediately and launched a search. Meanwhile, Michael had gone home and was completely normal. He'd ate his tea, done his homework, had a bath, and then proceeded to sleep soundly in the bedroom where only hours prior he had committed murder. The search went on late into the night. However, it wasn't until the next day, at around 10:30 a.m, that the body of 11-year-old Joe Geelan was found by a police dog hidden under some debris. It was clear to the officers that found him that he was the victim of a vicious killing, thus turning the case from a missing person to a murder. People who were with Joe the day before or had any information on him whatsoever were all questioned. One of these people included Michael. He admitted that he had seen Joe after school, but that they had only just briefly spoke in the street before going their separate ways. But this didn't sit right with some of the school staff. Michael was changing his story, and then remembering the note, this just didn't add up for the staff. Within an hour of finding Joe's body, Michael is escorted out of the school and is arrested. Initially, he did try to deny any involvement with Joe's murder. However, after a few hours, he made a full confession. A search of his house would find the note that lured Joe to his house, along with several other ones where Michael had wrote his sexual interest in Joe. At Manchester Crown Court on the 16th of October, Michael pled guilty to murder and was given a life sentence with a minimum term of 12 years to serve. This was later uplifted to 15 years. In 2016, he made a plea to have his sentence reduced, which was denied. He was able to apply for parole in March 2021, but I couldn't find anywhere if he had or if he has been released or not. Next week will mark 17 years since poor Joe was callously killed. He was a happy, bright young boy who did not deserve the end he was met with.
Wow. I'm telling you guys, watching these things, how are people capable of doing this stuff? How can you do these kind of things? I don't know if I'll ever understand it. Thanks for being here, though, guys. Hit the subscribe button and the like button, and I'll see you guys on the next video.